have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And hello, your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, May 11th. Your readers today are
Ted Bajracki.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we're going to start with the weather, and it's going to be cool today with some sun. The high will be about 53 degrees. It'll be clear to partly cloudy and cold tonight. Protect vegetation from potential frost. The low will be 35. Times of sun and clouds tomorrow, high of 57. Wednesday, it'll be breezy with occasional rain and drizzle and a high of 58 degrees. Our normal high and low temperatures for this date are 66 and 46. The record high was 86 degrees set back in 1993, and the record low was 26 degrees set in 1947. If it seems like we've had a lot of rain lately, it's because we have. Our normal precipitation to date is 13 inches. We've had 18 inches of rain so far this year, so we are 5 inches ahead of a typical year. And our air quality index today is forecast to be good. So there's a look at the weather. Ted, what's in the news?
Well, on the front page, we've got this article that says, Volunteer firefighter bill fight in Albany took a threatening personal turn. As a Republican in a legislative body controlled by Democrats, Assemblymember Joe Angelino faced an impenetrable political barrier to move his bill forward to provide a $2,500 tax break to volunteer firefighters and emergency medical workers. So on April 22nd, when the Shenango County-based Angelino tried to force a vote on the bill on the Assembly floor, the quick rejection of his motion was hardly unexpected. Nor was it unusual for Republicans to slam Democrats for rejecting it. What happened next would alarm members of both parties. Quote, simple. If the departments get a call, and if it's to one of their addresses, let it burn, end quote. One commentator wrote on Facebook page of the Assembly Republican candidate. It was underneath a post mentioning that Assembly members Patrick Burke, Karen McMahon, Jonathan Rivera, and William Conrad, all from Western New York, voted no on the bill. Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peak-Stokes from Buffalo was excused absent. If Conrad's house is on fire, no one answered the alarm, wrote the angry Facebook commentator on the Erie County Republican page. The comments since removed by Facebook drew quick condemnation from the Democrats, Republicans, and the Firefighters Association of the state of New York. Nobody should be threatened, said Assembly Minority Leader Edward Rah, a Nassau County Republican who leads Angelino's conference. We don't want anybody to be subject to violence. We don't want anybody's house to burn down. Conrad said he backed a separate volunteer fighter-related bill sponsored by McMahon. Her legislation, co-sponsored by Senator Monica Martinez, would increase personal income tax credits for volunteer firefighters and emergency medical service workers from $200 to $800, and for joint filers from $400 to $1,600. He said he voted against Angelino's attempt to bypass the Assembly Committee process, not on its merits. This is something we're working on, Conrad said. And then I go home and I start getting phone calls from friends who are volunteers saying, Bill, why did you vote no on this? I didn't vote no on this. I voted no on the procedure. The toxic reactions on social media drew attention to a vote whose outcome was all but preordained in Albany, where legislative majorities have ruled over their minority counterparts with politically iron hands for decades. It is rare for Republican sponsored bills to pass in either the Assembly or Democratic controlled Senate, unless they are parochial and non controversial in nature. Bills of a more statewide consequence are typically sent to a standing committee, where they remain. Angelino had initially proposed the bill for the $2,500 tax credit last year, co-sponsored by Senator Peter Oberacker, and it remained in the Assembly Ways and Means Committee and the Senate's Budget and Revenue Committee, with its future being bleak. On April 22nd, Angelino tried to force an Assembly floor vote via a motion to discharge. If successful, the motion would release the bill from its committee and allow the Assembly to vote on the measure. Motions to discharge, albeit quixotic, are one of the few options available to the GOP to put an issue on record before the entire House. It's a way to force a debate on the issue that is important to some group of lawmakers. It doesn't even have to be the minority powder, said Blair Horner, a longtime Albany watchdog in the New York Public Interest Research Group. It's the rule of the House. There's nothing that says you have to do it that way, but that's the way they wanted it. So it makes sense that lawmakers would want to use the rule. In his more than 4 decades in Albany, Horner said he has never seen a motion to discharge accepted on the floor. That has not stopped minorities in both houses, though, from proposing them. Our colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't believe our bills should see the light of day through the committee process, so the motion to discharge is another tool, Ross said. Ross said he regularly attends volunteer firefighter installation dinners where members of the departments ask him what state government is doing to help boost recruitment as it becomes harder for the departments to recruit members. Well, this was something that we thought we could do as a recruitment and retention tool for volunteer firefighters, Ross said. I think the bill speaks for itself.
Well, continuing now from the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next headline is, "How much cocaine was at Pharaoh's? Judge must weigh narcotics seen at Gerace's former club." From how the ex-dancers described it, cocaine use was rampant at Pharaoh's Gentlemen's Club. They would use in their locker rooms before going on stage or squeeze into a bathroom stall to snort the drug with customers. Sometimes strip club owner Peter Gerace Jr. would invite them to party with his VIP clientele in the private upstairs quarter of the Cheektowaga Club. Several testified at his federal trial in 2024. Cocaine was deeply ingrained in the business model at Pharaoh's, where addicted dancers would not have been able to sell lamp dances without using the drug, so Gerace made sure cocaine was accessible, prosecutors said. So, how much of the cocaine that flowed through the strip club should be attributed to Gerace? Coming up with an answer in grams has turned into a contentious issue between prosecutors and defense lawyers ahead of Gerace's sentencing in federal court on Wednesday. Whatever drug weight U.S. District Judge Lawrence Villardo adopts carries consequences because that number will help determine the recommended prison time for Gerace under federal sentencing guidelines. The more cocaine, the longer the recommended sentence. Prosecutors support holding him accountable for 5,080 grams, a little over 11 pounds, based on the assumption that at least 1 gram of cocaine sold at Pharaoh's each day it was open from 2006 until 2019. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Trippi cited trial testimony from 21 former dancers, employees, and customers that revealed a, quote, pervasive cocaine use at Pharaoh's, calling the 1 gram a day figure exceedingly conservative. But Gerace's lawyers call the government's claim speculative, artificially high, and argue that the judge should not adopt it. Drug quantity cannot be based on speculation, Gerace's lawyers Eric Sondlein and Mark Fotai said in a recent court ruling. A jury convicted Gerace on December 27, 2024, of maintaining Pharaoh's as a drug-involved premise from 2006 through 2019, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. by conspiring with then Drug Enforcement Administration agent Joseph Bongiovanni to avoid federal narcotics investigations, bribing Bongiovanni for protection from investigations, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking by enticing Pharaoh's dancers to engage in sex acts through coercion, and witness tampering. Throughout Gerace's trial, the defense lawyers called into question the credibility of ex-dancers who testified, some of whom used drugs before they went to work at Pharaoh's or were arrested on drug charges outside of Pharaoh's. Gerace calls them liars. Patrons were thrown out of the club and dancers were fired for drug use, Gerace said in a recent interview with the Buffalo News. They keep talking about all these drugs and girls, Gerace told the News. We were there for 20 years. There was no drugs allowed in Pharaoh's. Gerace said the ex-dancers and others who testified for the prosecution, quote, were fired for drugs. They were thrown out of Pharaoh's. They were fired for theft. People were fired all the time for that, close quote. He went on to say, we had thousands of girls working at Pharaoh's, but the only witnesses that prosecutors put on the stand were the girls that got fired from Pharaoh's, lying one after another, after another, after another. The defense lawyers say the government wants to calculate drug weight beyond the scope of the conspiracy and for conduct not attributable to Gerace. The linchpin of the government's argument is that Mr. Gerace is responsible for all drug activity at Pharaoh's, as well as the drug activity outside of Pharaoh's by witnesses who testified against him, according to his lawyers. Gerace's lawyers have pointed to a 2017 state police attempt to do an undercover cocaine buy at Pharaoh's. They went back time and time and time again, and they tried and they tried and they tried to buy cocaine. They didn't get any, Schoenlein said at Gerace's trial. Federal agents got weeks of footage from 55 cameras inside the club in 2019. They didn't find anything when they got that DVR system, Schoenlein told jurors. The FBI searched Pharaoh's the morning after Halloween in 2009. They were looking for drug trafficking activity, Schoenlein said at the trial. Turned the place upside down. You know what they found? Nothing. Gerace's defense team urged Velarde to calculate only the amount of cocaine from specific incidents that the dancers and other witnesses recalled during their testimony and not to extrapolate those amounts over time. Witnesses testified that many people used drugs covertly in the club's private area out of fear of being caught, Schoenlein and Fotai said. Credible evidence shows that drug use did occur at Pharaoh's, but was not widespread, it was not in the open, it was not in large quantities, and it was not condoned by Mr. Gerace or Pharaoh's staff, his lawyers said. To the extent that it did occur, it was consistent with drug activity that occurs at most bars and nightclubs throughout the country, the defense filing said. Gerace's lawyers contend the testimony showed that much of the drug use and drug sales were done independent of Gerace and, quote, done clandestinely, contrary to rules and directives of the club. At Gerace's trial, Trippi and other prosecutors emphasized how drugs fueled profits at Pharaoh's. Trippi referred to the private upstairs quarters at Pharaoh's as Gerace's, quote, private kingdom where cocaine parties flowed freely. This was to help keep the women high, help keep them in control, help coerce them, Trippi told jurors. That's how he was able to coerce them into commercial sex. Prosecutors portrayed Gerace as a predator who preyed on young, vulnerable, drug-addicted dancers demanding sex in exchange for drugs while also getting rich off their bodies when they sold lap dances in his club. Drug use among the dancers was rampant, Trippi told the jurors. Because breaking the rules and taking advantage of dancers made them more money, everyone disregarded it. The defendant knew it. He relied on it. It was his business model.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. And now we move on to the opinion section, and we'll start with an editorial from the Buffalo News staff. And the headline is Struggling to Compete. And this is about how local shops will benefit from Schumer's push for fairness in the meatpacking industry. Small businesses struggle while monopolies prosper. That's what's happening to the Niagara Sausage Company, which has a dedicated customer base and a rich history, including featuring foods made by other locals, Constanza's Rolls, Charlie the Butcher roast beef, and frozen pizza logs made in a factory only 5 miles away. Yet, Niagara Sausage, like many of its counterparts, is struggling to compete in the increasingly consolidated meatpacking industry. The small company's challenges are outlined in a recent story by the News' Francesca Bond. Prices for ribeye steak, for example, have climbed from $12 a pound a few years ago to $19. Even ground beef prices are at record levels throughout the country. In this David versus Goliath scenario, the little guys have a huge task of trying to retain customers while also avoiding unsustainable losses. Meanwhile, the largest players in the industry are doing quite well. This unfair situation is exactly why Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer visited the deli recently to publicize a bill he recently introduced to fight meatpacking monopolies. The Family, Grocery, and Farmer Relief Act should draw bipartisan support and passage. It has a patriotic message which should strike a chord with President Trump. Schumer said the bill would break up monopolies and bring meat prices back down. He pointed to 4 companies, Cargill, JBS, Tyson Foods, and National Beef, that he said control most of the meat market. In one provision that would help even the playing field for small businesses, meatpacking companies would need to choose one line of business. The days of controlling both beef and pork markets, for example, would come to an end. Companies that continue to control multiple meat sectors would face intervention from the Federal Trade Commission, which would create and enforce divestiture plans. It would introduce meaningful consequences and potentially meaningful change. Gaps left in the market from the divestment of meatpacking monopolies would be filled by small businesses. For family-owned companies, it would offer the chance to compete fairly, support their families, and retain loyal employees. The bill would also empower the Small Business Administration to offer financial and technical assistance and loan guarantees to farmers' cooperatives and small businesses. There is more to support in the proposal. The bill calls for the Federal Trade Commission to investigate meat pricing, price discrimination, and unfair methods of competition. The FTC would report its findings and enforcement to Congress. The bill also requires the FTC to conduct a comprehensive study of meat and food processors with foreign ownership, such as the Chinese-owned Smithfield Foods. At its core, the aim of the bill is to lower meat prices while helping small businesses survive, prosper, and expand opportunity in industries where many have operated for generations despite competing against monopolistic entities. Passage of this bill would be a game changer for businesses and customers alike.
Well, next we have the Another Voice column, and today the subject matter is health, and the author is Christopher Nalbach, who is a clinical services supervisor at the Evaluation and Treatment Center at Our Lady of Victory Human Services. And the headline on his column is Autism Evaluation and Support is Urgently Needed. It's more important than ever to build understanding, strengthen inclusion, and encourage meaningful support for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and their families. Why is awareness on the issue urgently needed? Because sadly, many local families continue to face a difficult reality. Getting the help they need is often much harder than it should be. An estimated 25% of children with autism spectrum disorder in our region remain undiagnosed. That means thousands of families are navigating developmental concerns without clear answers, professional guidance, or the benefit of early intervention. For many parents, the search for help can feel like an exhausting waiting game with the highest of stakes, the future of their children. Long wait times have only made the situation more challenging. One major regional autism clinic currently has more than 1,200 families on an 18-month waiting list for evaluations. Another in Rochester reports wait times of 12 to 14 months. At the same time, more than 100 new referrals are being added each month as families seek answers and support. Recognizing this growing need, Our Lady of Victory Human Services established the Evaluation and Treatment Center. Inspired by the compassionate mission of Venerable Nelson Baker, the center was created to help close the gap in autism services across the region. The Evaluation and Treatment Center provides multidisciplinary assessments and diagnostic evaluations for children and young people ages 2 to 21 who may be experiencing intellectual or developmental disabilities, including autism. By offering both evaluation and treatment services under one roof, the center allows families to move more quickly from concern to diagnosis and from diagnosis to meaningful support. The center's team of developmental and behavioral specialists is led by Dr. Ted Andrews, a medical director, pediatrician, and licensed psychologist. Through a collaborative approach, the team works to ensure that every child receives comprehensive evaluation in a welcoming, family-centered environment. Services are available at the Evaluation and Treatment's main clinic in the Lackawanna, as well as at satellite location services in Batavia.
And today's editorial cartoon comes to us from Al Goodwin of the Creators Syndicate, and it has two frames, one on top of the other. The top frame says 2023, and there's a gentleman in a blue suit, sophisticated looking, and he has a name tag. It says Garland on his name tag. And in the background, there are two airplanes. One is a blue airplane that says JetBlue, and the other is a yellow airplane which says Spirit Airlines. And the person, Garland, is saying, this merger can't happen. It would hurt travelers. In the frame underneath that, it's 3 years later, 2026. And again, Garland is speaking. And when he's talking about there, he says, and that's our job, to hurt travelers. And they show a Spirit airline belly up on the tarmac there, certainly out of business now.
Well, next we're going to turn the page to the opinion columns. And the first one comes from Carl Lubsdorff, who writes for the Dallas Morning News. And his headline is, Justice's Ruling Reverses Protections for Black Americans. It took the country's elected officials a full century after the Civil War to end legal racism in the South and grant the region's black citizens full access to the ballot box and the full range of political offices. but it took its most powerful unelected officials just 60 years to undo that historic affirmation of democracy and lay the basis for restoring a substantial degree of white supremacy to the region's politics. If you doubt that statement, just look at what's happened in the wake of last week's Supreme Court decision, which crippled the last major provision of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a law I watched President Lyndon Johnson sign that August in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. The white Republicans who control the governments of Alabama and Louisiana are moving to eliminate all or most of their 4 House districts represented by black Democrats. Other states are considering redistricting moves that a National Public Radio analysis said could ultimately replace up to 2/3 of the region's 23 black House Democrats and many of its state legislators with white Republicans. That's not a total reversion to the pre-Voting Rights Act situation when the South had no black members of Congress and the North had just 6, but it could cut the region's black representation to its lowest in half a century. In addition, moves by Republican-run southern states will almost certainly trigger counter-moves by northern Democrats, exacerbating the partisan gerrymandering wars that erupted after Texas Republicans heeded President Trump's demand to help maintain GOP control of the House by creating more Republican-controlled districts. Expect more extreme gerrymanders like the Virginia Democrats' 10-to-1 map or the Florida Republicans' 24-to-4 configuration, disenfranchising more voters than just Southern blacks. One progressive group, Fair Fight Action, suggests that Northern Democrats could add 10 to 22 seats, offsetting GOP gains in the South. Trump bears substantial responsibility for the decision because his 3 appointees provided half of its 6-vote conservative majority. But Chief Justice John Roberts, a critic of the Voting Act since he was a young Justice Department lawyer, also played a major role, though Justice Samuel Alito wrote the majority decision. As Chief Justice since 2005, Roberts has presided over a systematic dismantling of the Act, starting with a 2013 decision ruling out its requirement for Justice Department pre-clearance of voting law changes in states whose past discrimination made them subject to its provision. It's a far cry from the theory he espoused at his confirmation hearings when he likened judges to umpires, declaring, "Umpires don't make the rules, they apply them." He first suggested that the conditions that inspired the Voting Rights Act may no longer apply in an unrelated 2009 case where he alluded to the act and noted, whether conditions continue to justify such legislation is a difficult constitutional question we do not answer today. To be sure, the country's racial situation, especially in the South, is far better today than in the 1960s. Unfortunately, in today's highly partisan atmosphere, the latest court decision is encouraging Southern white majorities to limit representation by blacks and other minorities, the very thing the Voting Rights Act was intended to prevent. In the 1960s, a bipartisan consensus favored both the Voting Rights Act and the landmark 1964 Civil Rights Law, barring discrimination in employment, public accommodations, and education, both passed with strong congressional majorities of both parties. But that bipartisan consensus has frayed. Though Congress overwhelmingly extended the Voting Rights Act for another 25 years in 2006, some Republicans say it unfairly discriminated against the South. This month's reaction shows it has become yet another area dominated by partisanship.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 29 minutes after the hour. And our next opinion piece comes from Abby McCloskey, and its title is Conservatism Could Save America, at least the small c kind. Conservatism is in decline. A larger share of Americans last year described themselves as conservative, 35%, than liberal, 28%. But this 7-point difference is the smallest Gallup has measured since 1992. This is bad for American politics. As a philosophy, conservatism possesses the key virtue missing from modern political life: humility. What is liberty without wisdom and without virtue? It is the greatest of all possible evils, for it is folly, vice, and madness, wrote Edmund Burke, one of the fathers of conservatism. He was right. While conservatives have historically found a home in the Republican Party, it's not necessarily a partisan label. Conservatives represented as many as 20% of Democrats until the last decade, dropping to 8% today, and continue to make up more than a quarter of independents. We are feeling the effects of conservatism's decline. Populists and progressives, Christian nationalists and liberals, even libertarians, recall DOGE and Project 2025 increasingly favor sweeping, disorienting political change. It's small c conservatives who favor incremental reform and who are wary of concentrated power, government overreach, and demagogues. Of course, moderates favor moderation and divided powers too, and their influence is also in decline. But don't confuse a moderate for a conservative. For moderates, compromise is an end in itself. Conservatives favor incremental change out of respect for the past. What brought us this far likely has some good to it. Conservatism is a posture of gratitude, as one of its forerunners, William F. Buckley, wrote, "Another trait in short supply." The U.S. hasn't seen much conservative governments lately. Over the last decade, both parties racked up big electoral wins and took big swings at implementing their partisan visions. Republicans unified government in 2011 and 2018. Democrats unified government in 2021 and 22. Republicans unified government started again in 2025. Like clockwork, every 2 years of seeing what the party in power does, Americans have soured on their vision, flipped the switch for divided governments in midterms, and then given the other party complete control over Washington in the next presidential election cycle. And that's based on Beltway happenings over the past 10 years, from cover-ups to corruption, inflation to new wars. Really, who can blame us? But at a deeper level, there's no clear partisan mandate for governing America. According to Gallup, 27% of Americans identified as Republicans and 27% as Democrats. The largest political group in the U.S. is those who refuse to be identified by party. Independents now make up 45% of the electorate, a historic high. This calls for humility. It calls for political parties that moderate their policies, widen their coalitions, and not overestimate their reach. On this front, conservatism has much to offer. Conservatism is wary of concentrated power and moving too quickly. It reminds us that building institutions is harder than breaking them. Conservatism is rooted in the ancient principles of character, virtue, and dignity beyond immediate political expediency. As the political theorist Hannah Arendt wrote, "The old virtue of moderation, of keeping within bounds, is indeed one of the political virtues par excellence, just as the political temptation par excellence is indeed hubris." In their book, How Democracies Die, Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt argue that a small c conservative party is often the most critical gatekeeper in preventing democratic collapse by supporting institutions and upholding the rules of the game. This, of course, is not always a popular position. Burke himself was rejected across the political spectrum. The good news is that conservatism's revival doesn't depend on any party. It's a disposition toward politics available to everyone. Politicians and voters can choose to elevate leaders of humility and high moral character, lay out prudent and pragmatic answers to the challenges we face, and strengthen institutions and alliances. They can resist executive control and instead push Congress to function better. As a small c conservative, I admit I'm biased, but a dose of humility and true conservatism would go a long way to a better American politics.
Well, the national news, our headline is Science Fiction is Becoming a Reality for a Colorado Man. To say Brandon Patterson's father wasn't fully on board when he first brought up the idea of having electrodes implanted into his brain would be an understatement, and their family doesn't mince words. Brandon, 41, already relied on his dad for all of his daily needs, and that was the way it had been since Brandon broke his neck in a vehicle accident almost 9 years earlier, and they made it work. Monty Patterson trusted the doctors at UC Health knew what they were doing, but opening someone's skull always carries the risk of doing further damage. What would happen if Brandon lost control of the limited muscles he could use in his arms or his ability to speak? I said, if you're just doing this to play video games, I'm going to smack you, Monty said at the University of Colorado Hospital in Aurora, while Brandon was being hooked up to a computer tracking his brain activity. He said, no, I'm doing this so I can play video games and further science. Brain-computer interfaces that allow people to control artificial limbs using their minds exist at the boundary of science and science fiction, as is, a paralyzed person who has had the surgery and undergone the lengthy process of training the program can control objects on a screen and complete some movements with a robotic arm. But a system that would allow patients to regain the full abilities that they had before their injuries, while possible, remains only a hope. Brandon Patterson, who's paralyzed from the chest down, has limited use of his arms. He was the first person in Colorado to have a brain-computer interface implanted into part of his brain involved in decision-making during surgery in February. The researchers working with him aim to determine whether putting electrodes there, rather than areas specific to movement, will produce better control of screens or artificial limbs. They're also investigating whether they can send signals the other way to produce semi-natural sensation in limbs that can't communicate with the brain.
Our next headline is Trump rejects Iran's response to pitch for U.S. peace talks. President Trump on Sunday rejected Iran's response to a U.S. proposal for peace talks, dashing hopes for an imminent end to the 10-week-old conflict, and has caused widespread damage in Iran and Lebanon, paralyzed maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, and driven up global energy prices. Days after the U.S. floated an offer in the hopes of reopening negotiations, Iran on Sunday released a response focused on ending the war on all fronts, especially Lebanon, and on the safety of shipping through the blockaded Strait of Hormuz, Iranian state TV said. Within hours of the Iranian proposal's release, Trump dismissed it with a post on social media. And here is the quote, "I don't like it," and then in capital letters, "totally unacceptable." That's the end of the quote. That's what Trump wrote on Truth Social without giving further detail. Oil prices rose $3 a barrel after the United States and Iran failed to reach agreement. Iran's proposal includes a demand for compensation for war damages and an emphasis on Iranian sovereignty over the strait, state media said. It also calls on the U.S. to end the naval blockade, guarantee no further attacks, lift sanctions, and end a U.S. ban on Iranian oil sales, the semi-official Tasnim news agency said. The U.S. had proposed an end to fighting before starting talks on more contentious issues, including Iran's nuclear program. Despite a month-old ceasefire in the conflict and some 48 hours of relative calm, hostile drones were detected over several Gulf countries on Sunday, underlining that the threat still faces the region. But the Qatar energy operative carrier Al Khariyat passed safely through the Strait of Hormuz en route to Pakistan's Port Qasim, according to data from shipping analytics firm Kepner. It's the first Qatari vessel carrying liquefied natural gas across the strait since the U.S. and Israel started the war on February 28th. In addition, a Panama-flagged bulk carrier bound for Brazil that had previously attempted to transit the strait on May 4th passed through, using a route designated by Iran's armed forces, Tasnim reported on Sunday.
Well, Ted, as you know, pretty soon we're going to be getting a Costco here in Buffalo. And so this story is important, and it's headlined, "Panicked at the Costco." Like everything at Costco, the shopping carts are extra large, and Shelby Blessy, 34, isn't. At 4'11", she cranes her head to peer over the top of her cart as she maneuvers through the shoppers weaving wildly in and out of the crowded aisles as they scout deals and graze on samples. Often she has to slam on the brakes when people stop short or swivel on a dime to scoop up an item they forgot a few aisles back. "I've had people who didn't see me run right into me or trip over me," the Kansas City, Missouri teacher said. To be fair, Blessy accidentally rammed a few shoppers herself. "I don't mean to, but most of the time they bring it on themselves." The Costco shopping experience is immersive by design, from the big screen bling at the warehouse door to aisle after aisle of tantalizing deals to bag. Even when you're dashing in just to grab some toilet paper and milk, it's far too easy to succumb to sensory overload. "What was on my list? Where is my list? Wait, are those sheets on sale? Do we need sheets?" Costco is a very hectic store, and part of this is because it's so popular. Part of it's because it's a store where people can shop intensely, exploring different categories, buying in bulk, and stopping to sample things. The frenetic energy inside Costco warehouses also influences how people shop. Think of Mad Max, but with shopping carts. The internet calls the condition that afflicts some Costco shoppers cart tunnel vision, meaning they lose all situational and spatial awareness. On Reddit, one person coined the term Meanderthals because you can't tell where they're going, and neither can they. Seemingly unaware of their surroundings, these shoppers cruise along 4 and 5 abreast, with everyone else to squeeze around them, and rather going with the flow in aisles lined with high pallets that limit visibility, they barrel down the wrong side. And while some people pull over to oogle the tiramisu cheesecake, these shoppers double park or leave their carts in the middle of aisles where they block the flow of traffic. The log jams created by shoppers who crowd sample stations 4 and 5 people deep is next level rage bait in online Costco forums. At 6'3", 245 pounds, Ian Collins, 39, a real estate agent in San Diego, says it's like Black Friday every time he ventures into Costco. "It's pretty much 10 out of 10 my cart will get hit at least once, and 2 out of 10 I will get bumped," he said. You scan your membership card, and as soon as it beeps, people just go into feral mode. He drafted a common-sense shopping cart etiquette and shared it on social media. He said, "Treat your cart like it's your car. Don't park in the middle of the aisle. Don't run into people. Stay to the right. Go the same speed as traffic. Don't go against the flow. The number one rule, don't be a jerk. So now we're ready for when Costco opens here in Buffalo.
I think we're going to have to wear helmets when we go there.
And pads, maybe.
Yes. Financial news. Buffalo residents, weary of poor services, brace for a 25% tax hike. Amid the backlash against Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan's proposed 25% property tax hike, some residents say they are so frustrated by quality of life issues that they would rather pay a higher tax bill than watch services continue to decline. The city is staring down a projected budget shortfall of more than $100 million, attributed to 2 decades without a significant increase to the property tax levy. Some homeowners said they would rather pay more money than deal with recurring potholes, poor snow removal, and slow police response times, but only if the city can prove that the added money will lead to visible improvements in our neighborhoods. $25 a month is cheaper than a busted tie rod, said Mike Strauss, a homeowner in the city's Hamlin Park neighborhood. There are potholes that will rip the wheel off your car. That extra $25 a month is according to an estimate from the property tax calculator on the city's Department of Assessment and Taxation. It's a small price to pay for smoother roads, Strauss said. I did ruin a tire and a wheel rim in a giant pothole on Delavan Avenue, he said. Yeah, $25 a month is not great. I know a lot of people can't afford it. However, it is cheaper than these car repairs. Strauss would like to see improved roads, street cleaning, and better snow removal. He also wants to see a more responsive 311 system, which has fallen off dramatically since COVID-19. If we get a return in services and visible improvements in the city, tangible improvements, then it's worth it, he said. If we have improvements, I think the complaints will go down, and I think the people will be, in general, happier. He likened paying the tax jump to taking medicine and blamed the Byron Brown administration for kicking the can down the road and using federal funds to paper over the budget. According to the property tax collector, Nate Nowakowski of North Buffalo, we pay about $44 a month extra this year for his Colvin Avenue home. As someone who's owned their house for 17 years, it's been great not having a tax increase. However, he said, it shows. Both Strauss and Nowakowski said their current tolerance for the tax increase shouldn't be mistaken for a free pass to the Ryan administration. On the contrary, they'll be watching closely, they said. Kara McGuire plugged her South Avenue address into the property tax calculator and saw that she can expect to pay about $350 more under this new proposal. Not bad, she said. It's only going to be about $30 more a month. She said she worries about people on fixed income, but feels the increase is necessary.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. We have one local death listing, and that is Paul C. Weber, who passed away on April 20th. He was born in Buffalo on May 4th, 1966. He passed away suddenly in April 20th, 2026, at his home in Pine Hill, New York, which is in the Catskill Mountains. And we have one national death to report, Philip Caputo, age 84. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning investigative reporter and foreign correspondent for the Chicago Tribune before going on to write best-selling books, including his acclaimed 1977 memoir, A Rumor of War, which told about his searing experience as a lieutenant In the U.S. Marine Corps in Vietnam, near the start of the Vietnam War, the book sold 1.5 million copies and has been published in 15 languages. So again, if you need further information on either of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And now it's time for our look at the horoscope, and today's a pretty good day. Our stars are all 4s and 5s, and they're equally divided, 6 each. So if today's your birthday, you are innovative, imaginative, and unorthodox, but determined. This is because you are exceptionally self-disciplined. Good news. This year, you reap the benefits of all your hard work. So the stars will show what kind of day you're going to have. 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. Aries, 4 stars. The vibes are positive today, and they're great for doing research. Dig deep if you want answers to questions that concern you. Tonight, enjoy solitude. Taurus, 5 stars. Get out and enjoy the company of others, because this is a marvelous day to schmooze with friends. In particular, it's a great day to interact with groups, clubs, and organizations. Tonight, friendships. Gemini, 5 stars. You're a high viz today. Because people notice you more than usual, you might take this opportunity to speak up about something. Tonight, show respect. Cancer, 5 stars. Do something different today. You want to shake things up a little. Travel or a chance to learn something new about where you live will please you. Tonight, explore and learn. Leo, 4 stars. This is a good day for discussion about shared property taxes, debt, and financial matters. If someone owes you money, this is a good day to ask for it because your reputation is solid. Tonight, check your finances. Virgo, 4 stars. You make a great impression on bosses, parents, and VIPs today. In fact, some of you might strike up a flirtation or romance with a boss or somebody in a position of authority. Tonight, cooperate. Libra, 4 stars. This is an excellent day to do project planning related to your job or any kind of work that interests you. It's also a solid day to look for a job. Tonight, get better organized. Scorpio, 5 stars. It's Monday, and you're ready to work and get stuff done. Nevertheless, it's also the perfect day to socialize with others because people are friendly. Tonight, play and socialize. Sagittarius, 4 stars. Your privacy matters to you today, which is why you might want to relax at home and play things low-key. Tonight, just relax at home. Capricorn, 5 stars. This is a perfect day to be with your friends and people you love. Enjoy good times with neighbors, relatives, and siblings. Tonight, chatty conversations. Aquarius, 4 stars. Financial plans, budget plans, and project planning might appeal to you today. This could relate to your job, home, and family, or real estate. And tonight, check your belongings. And finally, Pisces, 5 stars. Today, the moon is in your sign, dancing beautifully with chatty Mercury, making this a great day to talk to friends and acquaintances. Tonight, you win. I hope that would go for the Sabres. You win.
Shouldn't that be tomorrow?
Oh, tomorrow.
We'll see what tomorrow brings, I guess. Now it's time to look back on this date in history, and our first is 868, the earliest known dated and printed book. A copy of the Diamond Sutra was published. Printed from wood blocks, the Buddhist text was dated, marked for general distribution, and dedicated to the printer's parents. In 1812, United Kingdom Prime Minister Spencer Perceval was assassinated, shot in the lobby of the House of Commons. In 1858, Minnesota became the 38th state. In 1894, in response to reductions in wages, workers at a Pullman factory in Chicago began a strike without approval of union leadership. The strike and a national boycott led to President Grover Cleveland sending federal troops to Chicago, to enforce an injunction barring union officials from directing or encouraging workers to not do their jobs. In 1934, a dust storm that began 2 days earlier in the plains carried dust as far as the East Coast, depositing it in cities from Boston to Washington, D.C. In 1947, the B.F. Goodrich Company announced that it had created a tubeless tire, no longer needing an inner tube. The company was granted patents in 1952, and the tires soon became standard on new cars. And then finally, in 1981, reggae star Bob Marley died of cancer at age 36. He was first diagnosed in 1977, but the cancer had spread by 1980.
Now we'll have some news briefs from our political notebook. And first, we go to the District of Columbia, and the headline is, Trump hails the release of a trio of prisoners. President Trump on Sunday posted on social media that 3 Polish and 2 Moldovan prisoners had been released from Belarusian and Russian detention. In a post on Truth Social, Trump credited Special Envoy John Cole for this release and thanked Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko for his cooperation and friendship. Trump also referred to the release of Polish-Belarusian journalist and activist Andrzej Poczobut from the Belarusian prison. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced Poczobut's release, which was part of a prisoner swap on April 28th.
You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Monday, May 11th, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ted Pajacki
and Ed Howard.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ed Howard.
and Ted Pajacki. We'll go to the regional and city news now. In the UB Street Medicine program to help the homeless in cities, suburbs, and rural areas. Homelessness is often thought of as a problem facing cities, conjuring images of people with nowhere to go living on urban streets or alongside major highways. But homelessness knows no borders. There are people, including hundreds in Western New York, without permanent shelter in rural and suburban areas also. Beginning this summer, a new street medicine training program for medical residents from the University at Buffalo will focus on providing care for homeless people throughout Erie and Cattaraugus counties, serving homeless people in urban, suburban, and rural areas. The program will serve as an update or continuation of an existing street medicine program that focuses on people facing homelessness within Buffalo's city limits. The 5-year program was developed by the University at Buffalo's Department of Family Medicine in the Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Science to train medical residents on how to provide high quality and compassionate care to patients who are struggling with homelessness wherever they may be. The goal, the overarching goal, is to equip family medicine residents with the skills necessary to provide high-quality patient-centered care, said Linda Kahn, the research professor of family medicine at UB. Kahn is leading the research team that will track the program's effectiveness and impact. The project is funded by a $2.5 million grant from the U.S. Health Resource and Services Administration to establish the Primary Care Training and Enhancement Residency Training in Street Medicine program. UB is the only institution in New York State and one of 24 nationwide to be granted this award, university officials said. Residents interested in this latest street medicine project will be able to apply starting in June. The program will serve as a national model for integrating street medicine into graduate medical education, addressing critical gaps in healthcare access for people experiencing homelessness and housing instability, UB officials said. The new report on homelessness in the region said there is a lack of available housing and an increase of people living on the brink due to financial and medical hardships. The combination has contributed to a significant rise in the number of Western New Yorkers who are homeless. The region saw a 24% increase in the number of homeless people compared with last year, representing the highest recorded total since data collection began in 2005, according to the Homeless Alliance, the local agency that collected the data across the 5-county coverage area in Erie, Niagara, Orleans, Genesee, and Wyoming counties. This year's data identified 2,188 people experiencing homelessness across the region, up from 1,768 last year, and includes 2,163 in shelters and 25 unsheltered. UB's new street medicine project also comes when many small hospitals and health clinics in rural communities, which serve a high percentage of Medicaid patients, are closing or facing uncertain futures. The One Big Beautiful Bill, the federal law that took effect in January, will reduce federal Medicaid spending by about $1 trillion nationwide by 2034, with $137 billion of that decrease projected in rural areas, according to an analysis by the Health Policy Foundation, KFF. The bill includes a 5-year, $50 billion fund for rural health care across the country, but many organizations, including the National Rural Health Association, question whether that will be enough to offset the decline in medical spending. Residents in the primary care and training program will be able to choose either an urban rotation through Erie County Medical Center or a rural rotation in Olean through the Universal Primary Care Health Center, a federally funded health center that serves as a primary training site for UB's Family Medicine Residency Program. The residents will go out into the community to provide medical care to homeless people where they find them, including shelters, transit depots, or on the streets, a crucial aspect of effective street medicine.
Well, staying on the front page of today's city and regional section, our next headline is Prosecutors Won't Appeal Dismissal of Charges in North Buffalo Triple Shooting Case. Erie County prosecutors will not fight the dismissal of charges in a 2024 high-profile triple shooting case in North Buffalo. The district attorney's office will not pursue an appeal of a judge's decision last month, throwing out the charges against Karen D. Fleming, said Caitlin Monroe, spokeswoman for the district attorney's office. Fleming, age 32, faced attempted murder, assault, and other charges for the January 6, 2024 shooting inside Sahara Hookah Lounge on Hurdle Avenue. Erie County Judge Kenneth Case dismissed the charges on April 2nd, ruling that prosecutors failed to follow speedy trial rules and didn't turn over evidence to Fleming's defense as soon as they should have. Fleming was accused of shooting 3 people and could have faced up to 25 years in prison if convicted. Prosecutors previously said Fleming was in a group with Buffalo Bills defensive end Shaq Lawson at the lounge that night. Fleming was in custody about 2 years awaiting trial. After Case's April ruling, the district attorney's office said it was considering appealing the case to the Appellate Division, 4th Department. When asked why they decided not to appeal, Monroe declined comment. The district attorney's office first declared it was ready for trial on June 11, 2024. The judge ruled items required to be turned over to the defense as part of the evidence-sharing process known as discovery were withheld by prosecutors. It is undisputed that several discoverable items, all generated prior to June 11, 2024, were not disclosed by the people for over a year, and in some cases 2 years after the declaration of readiness, Case wrote in his decision. Fleming's defense attorneys had said their client was acting in self-defense because he was being robbed and he planned to take the witness stand at his trial. Defense attorney James Maloney, who represented Fleming with attorney Robert Steinhaus, called the district attorney's choice not to appeal a wise decision. The court's ruling did not even address some of the more troubling allegations of failure to disclose evidence, Maloney said via text. The text messages between the key witness and the assistant district attorney, who has since left the office, were concerning. The messages referenced witnesses, video, and evidence never disclosed. Fleming is a rapper who has recorded under the name Shots All My. Shots All My is credited as a contributor to a 2023 album on the Drumwork Music Group label, which was founded by Buffalo rapper Conway the Machine. The entire case was bungled by the Buffalo Police Department from the start. A man spent 2 years in jail, something that should not happen today, Maloney said. It was clear this was a robbery of a successful musician, yet BPD ignored the facts. When asked for comment, a spokesperson for the Buffalo Police Department said, "We respect the court's decision."
Our next article is headlined, New Lake Erie Boy Called a No-Brainer. After it's deployed later this month, a new weather buoy in Lake Erie off Buffalo Shore will measure wind speed, temperature, wave height, water temperature, and lots of other data. It will add a new source of real-time data from the eastern end of Lake Erie, where conditions can change quickly and affect everything from boating to shoreline flooding. Researchers with the Buffalo State University's Great Lakes Center plan to place the new buoy NextSense CB 650 about 2 miles southwest of downtown Buffalo. The exact date of the deployment isn't set yet. They still need to finish work on the buoy and then wait for the clear and calm day on the water. Putting the new data gathering buoy in Lake Erie was a no-brainer, as Brian Haas, the field station manager for the Great Lakes Center, put it. There was a clear public need for this on the Buffalo waterfront, he said. For 60 years, the university has measured weather conditions in Lake Erie off of Dunkirk's shoreline. The high-tech equipment rests in 100 feet of water, measuring air temperature, wind speed, humidity, atmospheric pressure, wave height and direction, water temperature at various depths below the surface, dissolved oxygen, and conductivity. The Dunkirk buoy has been a great hit with anglers, sailors, and others who use the lake for recreation or business. So when Haas got the chance to put another buoy in the water, he knew he had to jump on it. He applied for a grant from the Niagara River Greenways Ecological Standing Committee, which gave the university $190,815 from the New York Power Authority's Niagara River Greenway Ecological Fund. Roughly $65,000 of that was spent on buying the buoy and the equipment on it, Haas said. The rest will be used to deploy and operate the buoy, as well as building out an educational program around the buoys, he said. Aaron Redding, a senior ecologist at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and co-chair of the Greenways Ecological Standing Committee, said funding for the buoy was approved unanimously. There's really not a negative to this buoy, she said. We see the benefits of collecting these real-time data for resource managers. We see the benefits for recreation and lifestyle fishers. And we see the educational benefits for people who are never going to go out near the buoy, but maybe they're not boating, but they want to learn about the lake. The Buffalo buoy will be placed in about 40 feet of water, almost exactly 2 miles west of Buffalo Harbor State Park. A massive and very heavy anchor and chains will keep the buoy in place while giving it enough slack to move up and down with the lake's waves. Skippers out of the water should be able to spot the buoy easily on a clear day with its bright yellow base. The buoy is also equipped with a radar deflector and light for additional visibility. At the beginning of each hour, a webcam mounted atop the buoy will capture a 30-second video of whatever it sees in that moment. For anglers headed out to fish for the day, the data can be used to see when water temperatures are rising and pushing fish down to the cooler water below. Sailors may enjoy the data on wind speed and wavelength and height, especially as sailing competition season starts to ramp up. Researchers and scientists can use the data to study ecological and meteorological issues on the lake. The buoy's measurements can also help give people a look at large-scale lake dynamics, including seriches, stratification, and seasonal changes. We've picked up the Sieches on the Dunkirk boy, but it'd be interesting to see the full effect in conjunction with the Dunkirk boy. It'll help us to get a good picture of everything that's happening out on those Sieches. A siege occurs when the wind moves huge amounts of water from one end of the lake to the other, causing water levels to rise and fall like water sloshing in a bathtub. The data gathered by the Buffalo boy, like the Dunkirk boy, will be available once it's deployed in the website called Seagull. The website can be accessed at seagullgloss.org. And Ed, I guess those gulls are happy that there's a new boy in town.
I'm not going to touch that. Well, let's see. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes past the hour. And Ted, recently we've been celebrating Victory Mondays as the Bills won on Sundays and the Sabres were winning their playoff games, but not today.
No.
Our next article is Mike Harrington's column, and the headline is Beat to the Punch, Buffalo doesn't want the bell to ring for the Habs. This corner has been super fortunate to have been in some crazy places over the years, both big and small. Yankee Stadium during the 2001 World Series really stands out. So do lots of cold winter nights in the din that's St. Bonaventure's Riley Center, and places hosting Stanley Cup finals like Chicago's United Center and the inaugural year of T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. But after what we saw Sunday night, I'll have to find a big red magic marker and add Bell Center 2026 to the list. I've probably covered 30 games here, and the place is always a buzzsaw in the dead of January. Still, I've never laid eyes on what I've seen and heard on Sunday. The Buffalo Sabres better figure out a way to keep things under control here Tuesday night, or one terrific season is liable to end in unceremonious fashion this week. The Sabres' 6-2 loss in Game 3 of their second-round series featured plenty of hockey-centric items that reflected the score. Jacob Dobes was the better goaltender, and you have to imagine Buffalo will go to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in Game 4 and give Alex Lyon a huge tip of its collective hat for the work he's done to get the team to this point. The Habs scored twice on the power play as the Sabres took too many undisciplined penalties. Buffalo's puck play was not nearly as sharp as it needed to be, and its defensive coverages were putrid at times. Tage Thompson scored just 53 seconds into the game and was far better than he was in Game 2 on Friday in KeyBank Center, but the Sabres got -2 nights from Thompson, Alex Tuch, Jack Quinn, Rasmus Dahlin, and Bowen Byram. Of that group, only Dahlin was on the ice for more than 40% of the expected goals at 5-on-5, which tells you the top guys simply weren't good enough. The biggest takeaway, however, was the venue itself. The Bell Center crowd of 20,962 probably deserved one of the 3 stars. There were multitudes of red-clad folks swarming outside before the game, with a third viewing screen added so the thousands could get a better view of the game. Inside the hallowed doors of hockey's Mecca, and in parentheses, sorry Toronto, the scene was wild. The fans' Ole, Ole, Ole song started up a full 15 minutes before warm-up. You should hear it when the building is full. The pregame presentation was capped by a former Habs captain walking into the arena bowl with a flaming torch held high, and the fire then explodes in projection form on the ice. It is spine-tingling. The scene speaks to the quote, "To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high," that's been displayed in the team's dressing room since the 1950s and is from the World War I era poem In Flanders Fields. Sunday's torch captain was Kirk Muller, whose overtime goal in Memorial Auditorium eliminated the Sabres in a 4-game sweep in 1993, the Habs' last Stanley Cup season. The Sabres didn't come to the rink Sunday for a morning skate, but they had an idea of what the scene was that they were about to enter. "I think it's going to be an electric atmosphere for sure," said winger Back Malenstein, who probably could not have imagined how true his words would prove to be. You play here on a Saturday night in the regular season and it feels like the roof is going to come off. We're very excited just to get out there and feel that energy. This was the team's first playoff meeting since 1998, and that was a Sabres sweep in Lindy Ruff's first season as a coach. He knew what was coming. I've been in this building before in the playoffs, and the energy is incredible, Ruff said prior to the game. You've got to embrace you get to play in one of hockey's hotbeds, and the crowd is going to be tremendous. It didn't seem like the Sabres embraced it at all. Lyon was bang on when he said the second period got away from the Sabres in a bad way. Thompson's goal was exactly what the Sabres needed, but it didn't really give them the momentum you would have hoped. He said there were too many emotions flying around on the ice and the bench, all amid the craziness. We talk all the time about staying even-keeled through highs and lows. Stay right in the middle, Thompson said. I thought tonight we really let our emotions get the better of us. It's a challenge for sure. The place was loud. You feel the energy, and then you feel the momentum come off it, but that's just something you've got to get used to, something that can't affect us, any of the outside noise. The Sabres have to be better defensively, have to stay out of the penalty box, and might need to take some air out of the puck, so to speak.
Next we have news reporter Rachel Lindsay's perspective on that game. Her headline is, after a fast first minute, Montreal takes control. It started with a bang, specifically with Tage Thompson's goal in the opening seconds for the Buffalo Sabres. Then it turned into a track meet as the Canadiens jumped out to a 3-goal lead. And it ended with the Canadiens outrunning and outpacing the Sabres, and with Montreal goalie Jacob Dobush all but stonewalling them on the third period 6-2 win in Game 3 of their second round Stanley Cup playoff series at the Bell Center, giving the Canadiens a 2-1 series lead. The best of 7 series continues with Game 4 at 7 p.m. tomorrow night at the Bell Center. The Sabres couldn't honor a red-letter date in team history. Back on May 10th in 1998, the day Matthew Barnaby scored his only career hat trick in a 6-3 win against Montreal in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinal. They couldn't give Alex Tuch a well-deserved 30th birthday present either. Instead, Lane Hutson, Cole Caulfield, Jake Evans, and Alex Newhook each had 2 points for the Canadiens, who dominated most of the first and second periods and long stretches of the third, failing to give goaltender Alex Lyon much help. Josh Doan extended his point streak to 4 games with an assist on Rasmus Dahlin's power play goal late in the second period. Doan has 1 goal and 4 assists in that span, and it made him the first Sabres forward to have an assist in 4 straight games since Tim Connolly, who had 4 assists in 4 games from April 27th to May 4th, 2007. Thompson needed less than a minute to bounce back from a poor showing in Game 2 by scoring his first goal of the second round series. He picked up the caroom off the backboards of Dahlin's initial shot from the left point and poked it behind the glove side of Dobush 53 seconds into the game. Newhook tied the score with his 3rd goal of the series and 4th goal of the playoffs at 15:31 of the first period, picking up a rebound off Jake Evans' initial shot, and he beat Lyon with a shot that also got past Bowen Byram on the play. With Doan penalized for tripping, Canadiens defenseman Lane Hutson deked through a pair of Sabres penalty killers, then passed the puck to Cole Caulfield, who beat defenseman Connor Timmins and Lyon to give the Canadiens a 2-1 lead at 6:05 of the second period. A goal in a sequence that even Sabres left wing Jordan Greenaway, who defended much of the penalty without a stick, applauded before he picked himself up off of the ice. The Canadiens appeared to add another goal a little more than a minute later, but officials waved off the goal by Philip Danault, ruling that Lyon had been pushed into the net on that goal at 7:10. The Canadiens got that one back, though, less than 4 minutes later, after defenseman Logan Stanley misplayed the puck in the neutral zone, and Canadiens center Joseph Veleno picked it up and in the zone and set up Zachary Bolduc, who was untouched in the slot between Tuch and Thompson, and beat Lyon at 10:43. Less than 2 minutes later, the Canadiens scored their second power play goal and took a 4-1 lead. The Canadiens will host the Sabres in Game 4 at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Then the series returns to the KeyBank Center for Game 5 on Thursday, with a time yet to be announced.
Well, while the hockey playoffs are going on, so too are the NBA playoffs. And with a rain of threes, the Knicks are pouring it on. Record-tying shooting helps New York sweep past the Sixers for a 30-point win. Closing out a playoff series is one of the toughest challenges in sports, but the red-hot New York Knicks are making it look easy. Miles McBride made 7 out of 9 three-pointers for 25 points, and Jalen Brunson scored 22 on 6 of 10 shooting from long range as the visiting Knicks throttled the Philadelphia 76ers 144-114 in Game 4 on Sunday to sweep their second-round playoff. It's the spacing, said Knicks coach Mike Brown, whose team also dominated the decisive game in its first-round series with the Atlanta Hawks 140-86. The Sixers are so quick, they're so athletic, so if you're not spaced the right way, you're not going to get great looks. One game at a time, one game at a time. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it if we have to. The Knicks' offensive assault came despite the absence of second leading scorer, outside guard Arumbi with a hamstring. In another game, the Cavaliers cut the Pistons series lead to 2-1. Donovan Mitchell had 35 points and 10 rebounds as the Cavaliers beat the visiting Detroit Pistons 116-109 in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals on Saturday afternoon. The fourth-seeded Cavaliers lost the first 2 games of the series in Detroit, but ended the contest on a 12-5 run to remain unbeaten at home in this postseason. James Harden came through in the clutch, scoring 7 of his 19 points in the final 19 seconds. Game 4 is tonight in Cleveland, where the Cavaliers are 10-1 all-time in the playoffs against the Pistons. And Anthony Edwards scored 16 of his 36 points in the fourth quarter, and the Minnesota Timberwolves took advantage of Victor Wembanyama's ejection in the second quarter to post a 114-109 win over the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday night in Minneapolis to tie the Western Conference second-round series at 2 games apiece. And finally, A.J. Mitchell scored 18 of his 24 points in the second half as the Oklahoma City Thunder dominated the final 24 minutes en route to a convincing 131-108 victory over the Los Angeles Lakers in Game 3 of their Western Conference second-round series on Saturday night.
And even though it doesn't feel like baseball weather around here, the major leagues are going strong, and in their headlines, we have that the Giants pitcher Webb is going to be heading to the International League in a rare move. San Francisco Giants right-hand pitcher Logan Webb was placed on the injured list with right knee bursitis on Saturday, meaning he will miss a start for the first time in 5 years. The move was retroactive to Wednesday. Webb last pitched on Tuesday, allowing a season-high tying 6 earned runs along with 7 hits and no walks, with 4 strikeouts on 62 pitches in a 10-5 home loss to the San Diego Padres. He left after 4 innings with knee discomfort. And in news from around the league, the Padres, San Diego minor league pitcher Humberto Cruz pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of transporting undocumented immigrants. He was the team's number 5 prospect before his arrest on October 28 last year. As part of his plea deal, Cruz agreed to self-deport to Mexico, and he will be ineligible to receive a work visa for at least 5 years. From the Giants, after missing nearly 22 months because of injuries, left-hander San Hentges is set to make his return with San Francisco. And from the Red Sox, Boston first baseman Wilson Contreras left Sunday's game after being hit on the right hand by a pitch. And the Reds, Cincinnati placed right-handed rookie Rhett Lauder on a 15-day injury list with an injury to his throwing shoulder. And from the Tigers, Detroit placed outfielder Kerry Carpenter on the 10-day IL with a left shoulder sprain. And the stat of the day is 9. New York Yankees right-hander Cam Schlittler is the first Major League Baseball pitcher to have at least 50 strikeouts, fewer than 10 walks, no more than 1 homer allowed, and a sub 1.5 ERA through his first 9 starts of the season since Hall of Famer Walter Johnson did that in 1913. You remember that, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, sure. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service, and the time is now 31 minutes past the hour, and it's time to turn to Ask Eric. And our headline here is, Caregiving Friend Struggles to Hold a Healthy Boundary. Dear Eric, my brother and I are helping an elderly cousin who has cancer. Her chemo treatments have terrible side effects, and she is requiring more and more care because of this. Ideally, she would be getting home health care or would move to an assisted living facility. However, she does not have cash flow to pay for services. She wishes her niece to inherit her home. It's been in our family for a century. However, this niece has mental health issues, lives 700 miles away, and does not fly or drive. Inheriting this house would be a burden, not a blessing to this niece. We have tried to bring up the subject of selling the house and using some of the money for her own care, but she refuses. The end result is my brother, a friend of hers, and I are all being asked to provide way more care than we feel comfortable doing because she will not spend money for needed care. The friend finds it difficult to set boundaries. We've coached him on how to do this, but it hasn't been effective. He does let us know this has become a burden for him. I'm very willing to bring up this subject with her, and I'm going to meet the friend again to discuss boundaries, but I would like to know some ways to keep the conversation non-judgmental and positive. Signed, Growing Tired. Dear Growing Tired, one part of holding a healthy boundary with your cousin may involve setting a boundary with the overly helpful friend. It sounds like, despite your efforts, you're being drawn further into this situation by taking on the responsibility of coaching him. This places you at the center, which creates more strain and stress. He has to be responsible for doing what he can and communicating with your cousin about what his limits are. Release yourself from this responsibility of managing this part of the situation. With regard to your cousin, be honest with her about how impossible the situation has become. Tell her that you're in it with her, but the way that it's going now isn't working for anyone. Ask her to help you think through some solutions. This relieves you of some of the burden of giving her an ultimatum and encourages her to continue to be an active part of her care plan. If you haven't already done so, reach out to the niece. It's not clear to me if she knows about the plan to leave her the house. This could be an opportunity for her to have an honest conversation with your cousin about whether she wants it, which could in turn free your cousin to make other choices, including renting it or selling it. Dear Eric, I'm writing in response to the letter from the son who's tired of having to Google answers to questions from his dad. And that letter was signed Not Google. My husband and I have been together for 25 years. My family used to comment frequently about our conversations that it was amazing we could talk about everything and nothing for hours and be so pleased. But time and life marched on. My husband and I have grown apart. Recently, I've really struggled to get something back that we can hold on to, and I focused a lot of my efforts on rebuilding our conversations. In the past decade or so, my husband has developed an addiction to the supercomputer in his pocket. If I try to start a conversation, he'll whip out Google and immediately end it with a definitive answer. This bothers me to no end. I've asked my husband to stop pulling out his phone during our conversations, and it's something we argue about, unfortunately. He feels like there isn't access to the answer, so why shouldn't he just get it? It's just reading not Google's letter that I realized what my point is. The goal of a good conversation is the journey, not the particular destination. Signed, Not Looking for Google. Dear Not Looking, thank you for sharing your experience. I hope that you're able to recapture some of the ease you found in early conversations with your husband. I want to applaud you for not settling for something less than what you want. Every relationship goes through its changes just as the people inside change. We owe it to ourselves and to each other to keep being creative and curious about how to maintain connections that matter to us. You may also appreciate using conversational prompts like card games, Where Should We Begin by Esther Perel, or the and by a company called Skin Deep. You can even write your own prompts based on things you used to enjoy discussing or memories you share.
Our next article is about education in a very controversial area of education nowadays. The headline is Schooling Without Screens. And it's about how more parents of elementary schools students are saying no to gamified math and video read-alouds. Frustration is simmering among parents who say their young children are spending too much classroom time online, disrupting their learning and development at a critical time and clashing with stricter screen restrictions at home. Grassroots coalitions across the country are emerging in school districts as parents grow increasingly alarmed that digital activities are replacing hands-on learning and peer interaction with very little oversight. Groups want more transparency on technology use, strict limits on screen time, and more rigorous vetting on software products. Julie Edwards grew worried when her daughter began coming home from kindergarten talking about Gigi, the penguin who stars in the app on her school-issued iPad. Gigi guides her child through gamified math lessons that have become a favorite part of her day. It breaks my heart, said Edwards of Taguna, California. My child comes home and she doesn't tell me about her teacher. She doesn't tell me about her classmates. She tells me about Gigi the penguin from her gamified learning app. Edwards was told that her daughter spends 15 to 30 minutes a day with Gigi. But even in small doses, what concerns Edwards is that Gigi is a central character in her child's school day. Edwards is planning to move her kindergartner to a charter school that limits screen time. She'll join her 4th grade sister, whom Edwards moved last year when screens began to affect her learning. Gamified lessons on individual devices and video-directed read-alouds and sing-alongs have become more common in elementary school since the pandemic, including in transitional kindergarten and kindergarten. Nearly 1/3 of parents say their children under the age of 8 have used AI for school-related material, according to Common Sense Media, which surveyed more than 1,500 families. For these young students, early childhood experts say children should focus more on hands-on learning for development. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends families prioritize non-digital activities like play and social interaction for children 5 and under. Though the organization no longer recommends a specific time limit, an hour is a good goal, said Dr. Tiffany Munzer, the lead author of an organization policy statement on technology use. Parents said children as young as 4 are assigned lessons on tablets and Chromebook as part of their academic instruction and are not always prevented from accessing apps such as YouTube and Minecraft during class, taking away from teacher-led learning. In 2026, at least 16 states, including Iowa, Vermont, and Virginia, introduced legislation to reevaluate screen time or vet educational technology. At least 4 states, Kansas, Utah, Minnesota, and Tennessee, are considering prohibiting devices in at least part of elementary school. The movement to ban or severely restrict screen time learning for elementary age students comes as nearly 40 states have passed legislation to prohibit or restrict cell phone use in schools. The push for restriction runs counter to what is a reality of digital life for American families whose young children at home often engage in hours of daily screen time. Too much screen time can lead to language, cognitive, and social emotional delays, as well as challenges with how children manage daily tasks and control impulses, said Munzer, who is also a member of the American Academy of Pediatric Council of Communication and Media. Human-centered activities are vital for young learners, Munzer said. Kids in the preschool and kindergarten years really benefit from hands-on play and tactile learning experiences, she said. Young children learn best really through these socially mediated experiences and by involving the senses. For Kate Brody, whose first grade son attends a charter school in the San Fernando Valley, the addictive nature of her son's school-assigned iPad led to bathroom accidents during class. At first, she thought the incidents were related to her son's adjustment to his new grade level. But then she discovered they were consistently happening during the class's iPad time. Too invested, he would ignore his body's signals, she said. He's not able to tell he needs to go to the bathroom because he's sitting there with headphones on for an hour playing these games that are sort of addictive, said Brody, who handles communication for Schools Beyond Screens, a parent coalition pushing for changes in the Los Angeles Unified School District. A Los Angeles School District spokesperson said elementary school students average between 31 and 50 minutes of screen time, adding that the district works with schools to ensure they are using technology responsibly and effectively. Distraction-Free School Policies Project, which has led advocacy on the state level, wants to prohibit individual devices in kindergarten through 5th grade and is pushing for a return to handwritten testing. Individuals from districts across the state have begun attending the California chapter's meetings since it got off the ground in December. We're trying to connect parents across the state. Every day, we're getting new members, Cararon said. Some California school districts are reevaluating their technology policies. LA School District recently introduced a resolution that would require the district to develop a screen time policy and way prohibiting the use of one-to-one devices for students up to the second grade. If passed, the board would implement the new policy as soon as the next school year. Walking into classrooms, I've seen kindergartners on their iPads, and it strikes me at my core. Kids should be outside. They should be playing. They should be using manipulatives and tactiles.
Well, our next article is headlined Cloud Cover, and it says how internet-based data storage became a computing necessity in just 20 years. Name something invisible that you use every day. If you answered the cloud, you're spot on. Sure, air and gravity would work too, but the fact that the cloud only debuted 2 decades ago makes its dominance pretty amazing. To be more specific, it was AWS, or Amazon Web Services, that launched in 2006 a product called widely considered the beginning of modern cloud computing. Quite simply, the cloud refers to storing and accessing your information and programs over the internet instead of on a local device. For consumers, you can stream a movie via Netflix just as easily as if the content were on a disk in your home. Do you access Gmail on several different services like a phone, tablet, or laptop? That's possible because your messages are stored in the cloud. The same goes for uploading and viewing your photos on services such as Dropbox or OneDrive, Google Photos, or iCloud. Cloud computing relieves us from much of the drudge work associated with keeping our own computing resources up and running, says Carmi Levy, a technology analyst based in London, Ontario. We no longer need to worry about which software is installed on which device and whether it's been updated to the latest version, nor do we have to manage large stores of data on our drives or sync them between different devices. For businesses, it could be costly and complicated to set up and run their own physical in-office servers. Having data stored elsewhere also protects files from local threats like a cybersecurity attack, power outage, fire, or flood. Plus, companies don't need to spend money on buying and maintaining expensive hardware. Instead, the cloud works as a subscription or pay-as-you-go fee. Like all new technology, some tech analysts, journalists, and executives questioned or even pushed back against cloud adoption. In an interview with The Guardian in 2008, Richard Stallman, founder of the Free Software Foundation, believed moving data to the web was, quote, stupidity. It's worse than stupidity, it's a marketing hype campaign. Cloud computing is simply a trap aimed at forcing more people to buy into locked proprietary systems, Stallman said. Granted, there are always naysayers when new technology is introduced. With the cloud, many were legitimately curious or concerned about security, scalability, and costs. But it didn't take long for the cloud to prove itself. Most of the excitement for me is witnessing new levels of growth each year, says James Hamilton, Senior Vice President and Distinguished Engineer at Amazon, who's widely regarded as one of the primary architects behind the massive physical and software infrastructure that powers Amazon Web Services. Even though I've been doing this for 20 years, it's super exciting and rewarding. AWS is the largest cloud provider with an estimated 28 to 29% of global market share, according to Synergy Research Group. Many customer-facing brands like Airbnb, Netflix, Lyft, Disney+, Twitch, and Spotify all run on AWS in some capacity behind the scenes. After working at Microsoft and IBM, Hamilton joined AWS in 2009 and is credited for pioneering the data center cost models that proved how cloud computing is less expensive than traditional on-premise hardware. Hamilton says his job is to iron out and even the odd blips for temporary outages. While outages happen, they're rare. In 2025, across all major providers, uptime stayed above 99.99%, according to Incident Hub. So what's next for the cloud? supporting the rapid growth of artificial intelligence, of course. Massive computational power is needed to run AI systems which are primarily based in the cloud. For example, a basic chat GPT prompt consumes as much as 10 times the energy as a simple Google search. And by automating complex resource management and enabling real-time data processing at scale, AI makes the cloud more efficient and predictive for industries. Now, Ted, everything that comes around goes around and comes around again. I'm old enough and have been involved in the information services industry long enough to remember back in the 70s and 80s, this was called time sharing.
Okay. We take a step back now to the opinion section, and this is the My View column, which was written by Mary D. Martucci. And the headline is, Anthem event was no surprise to those who know the close bonds between Western New York and Canada. What's all the fuss about? Like most hockey fans in Western New York, I was watching the lead up to the Sabres Game 5 with the Boston Bruins on April 28th with great apprehension and anticipation. More than 19,000 hockey fans stood for the singing of Canada's national anthem and then the American anthem. We were all waiting impatiently for the game to start. But first, the anthem. When Cammy Clune's mic failed, the fans, in one voice, firm and sure, stepped up and sang every word. Since then, this special occurrence has been widely reported on national and international news outlets. Some reports have expressed surprise and awe. Some people, especially Canadians, like those two whose letters were recently in the Buffalo News, were gratified. I was not the least bit surprised. Gratified and touched, but not surprised. We are neighbors and friends, and that's what neighbors and friends do, especially in Western New York and Southern Ontario. We help one another. Could you pick out a Canadian from an American in that crowd? The tradition of singing both Canadian and American anthems at the Sabres games has carried since 1970. I treasure it, and I wish the tradition was followed at every National Hockey League game. It seems a fitting tribute to a sport that Canada rightfully claims as its own, wherever it came from and however and wherever it has flourished. And it is one overt symbol of what we all value. Pride of country, of course, caring for each other, and rooting for our home team. Don't we all remember that March day in 2023 at the Scotiabank Arena? At a Sabres Leaf game in Toronto, the mic gave out during the singing of the American national anthem. And don't we all recall how all those fans already standing sang our anthem? Could anybody watching that distinguish a Canadian from an American? No, because again, everyone singing knew all the words. How many Canadians cross the border for Bills games every fall and winter? How many Americans cross the border to root for the Blue Jays? And can anyone distinguish an American from a Canadian in the stands? Why would anyone want to? What about visiting friends and neighbors, many of whom are Americans on the shores of Lake Erie? Canadians have been frequent shoppers at our malls and grocery stores, and hopefully that will become easy to do again soon. We are so fortunate to be able to visit Niagara-on-the-Lake. My grandchildren will soon travel to Toronto to take in a Blue Jays game. These casual back and forths reinforce and enrich the special bond among all of us. It certainly used to be easier, much easier, to cross the border than it is today, and hopefully that pendulum will swing back soon. Tensions at the national level notwithstanding, we here in Western New York and Southern Ontario are neighbors and friends in the best sense of the words. We share so much. Niagara Falls, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and the many streams and lakes everywhere. We share as our base a common heritage and a culture that fosters friendliness, community, and caring for one another. Let's treasure the richness of our life here, regardless of which side of the border we call home.
Well, we'll wrap up today with a few short items, and we'll start in Gaza, where Israeli strikes killed at least 3 Palestinians on Sunday, including 2 members of the Hamas-run police force, health officials said. It is violence that underscored the fragility of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer vowed to fight on, describing his government as a 10-year project despite mounting calls for him to quit after his party's drubbing in local elections last week. And in Morocco, a search team recovered the body of a U.S. soldier who went missing near a cliff training exercise. The Army said Sunday. The Army identified him as First Lieutenant Kendrick Lamont Key Jr., a platoon leader in an artillery unit. And 2 Singaporean nationals missing following the eruption on Mount Dukonomo on Indonesia's Halmahera Island were confirmed dead on Sunday, the local rescue agency said. Rescuers found the bodies holding each other under a rock debris around the center rim, according to the local agency.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for May 11th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. We thank you for listening, wish you a good day, and go Sabres.
Go Sabres.
Welcome summer with your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We're planning a summer bash bigger and better than ever before. It's Friday, June 26th at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove, located at the corner of Union Road and William Street in Cheektowaga. You're invited to enjoy a buffet, chicken and pasta dinner, your first drink on us, a basket raffle, and Buffalo Music Hall of Fame party band The Boys of Summer from 6 to 9 p.m. Tickets are $50 and support the 160 volunteers who read all the programming offered by Radio Reading. That's Friday, June 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove in Cheektowaga. Get your tickets now by calling 716-821-5555 extension 3 or online at nfradioreading.org. Thank you to New Era Kep Foundation, Tyverin Law, and Perry's Ice Cream for sponsoring this largest event of the year.
program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding